Ladies and gentlemen, it is Wednesday. We are DebateSensei. Here we go. I am Jerry Kabika Miller. I am your debate coach and professor of communications. We have Matt Shapiro, Esquire.
Hello, everybody.
Tim Seavey from Dissolutions and affiliations with San Diego State University. Yes, that is us. That is us. Holy moly, where are we right now?
We are 5 minutes late, and I just wanted to say to all of you viewers watching, all 10 million of you, the professor was late today. It wasn't our fault, everybody. So we all can put our phones down 5 minutes into class time and start watching now.
Oh my God. People that had that fake rule about 15 minutes.
You know what they say about people who are late?
If you're 15 minutes late, then class is canceled, right? That's the rule.
Get out of here. Okay.
Oh,
man. Anyway, so today we're talking about the Electoral College is what I was told. Is that right, Jared? Professor Jared?
Yeah, we are talking about the Electoral College, and clearly we had motivation for doing this, right? Because we are still awaiting the results of several states in order to
of the Electoral College.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Look at that.
Huh.
Well, now I think, do we all envision the Electoral College as a bunch of dudes smoking cigars in a train somewhere with the nice, whiskeys in their glass or something? I don't know. They're all educated at some school I don't know about.
Listen, you got to assume that. Like, that's how it started, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's how it all started. In fact, I was hoping to briefly touch on how it all started.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think in order to really understand, people are like, what is the Electoral College? Let's just start with that, right? I mean, so a little history lesson. I think you cannot even broach this whole subject without, 1 minute of history. Okay, so back in the day, around 17-something, they were trying to make this country, right? They were trying to branch off from another country. And they had these few states. There's a few of them. I think 13 or something like that. We all know that, hopefully. And if not, now you know.
Or you kind of know because something
there's
like
13
that.
colonies at some point, and they all needed to agree. There was what was it? The Congress Convention of 1776, something like that. And they all need
convention.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, this history lesson is not going the way that I expected.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, I lied. It's going to be 2 minutes. It's going to be 2 minutes. I'm going to summarize.
All right. And then there was want to put some amendments in this bitch right here.
Whoa. Okay. So there's big states and there's small states. And the big states, when I say big, I mean large population states, they needed to convince the small states to sign the document. They're like, look, this is good for you too. And the small states are like, look, man, if you go by, new numbers, you guys swamp us out of the world. So the Electoral College, I think, started because of that premise. Can we agree on that? Are you familiar with that at all?
No.
That's not quite it.
Yeah,
the great compromise was the houses of Congress, but it eventually helped with the Electoral College.
Educate me, both of you.
Okay.
Go.
So you they were really, really afraid of mob rule. They really were. Okay. So at the time, it wasn't everybody goes out and votes, right? So there's two parts to this. All right. One part is the logistics of collecting votes way back in the day. Think about that. They didn't have a mail system. They didn't have internet. They didn't have there's a lot of things they didn't have, right?
It was a lot slower, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. But how do you count votes and how do you determine who is a legitimate voter? So luckily,
logistics.
Yeah, right. So that was part logistics. The other part is just blatant racism. So
Fair enough.
it beyond not just racism, but just abject classism as well. Okay, because
and sexism. Don't forget that one too.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what I mean? It's just like, and so the number of people who were allowed to vote was really, really reduced down to a select few people. And even then, they were worried about how do we know what is a legitimate vote or not. So the Electoral College was kind of this way of creating the closure. Now, I am a big fan of closure, right? Having an
finality.
Yeah, you know what I mean? We know what the decision is. And so instead of having everyone voting and counting them up, you had a very small group of people, and now you know how they voted, and you can determine that. And that part is kind of still cool today. You know what I mean? That you have closure. It's like you have to get these points in order to win. But then things start kind of falling apart considering modernization.
So
right? You know what I mean?
The 12th Amendment in 1804, so we're super, super close to numbers, but it was the 12th Amendment, and the idea was that the Electoral College would prevent against the election of demagogues. So that was like the original language surrounding it. So that if you had someone that happened to really sway the masses and was a very charismatic or very, popular individual, but potentially really damaging to the Union, that this select group of high-minded individuals could prevent against that and overrule the votes of the people. They're supposed to represent them, but theoretically they could be faithless electors and go their own way, so they could diverge off of what they were supposed to be representing their district. So that's where you get the idea of like the Electoral College could go other ways. Obviously, that's very much different when our population is 360 million times bigger. Well,
yeah.
It's a different world.
Right, and so like the logistics, I think, is actually the smaller part. I'm kind of interested in it
now.
Yeah, well, even then, I think much bigger parts were like who wasn't allowed to vote. I think that should really get a lot more attention than the logistics part. But I'm weird, and I like focusing on logistics and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, okay, and one of the reasons I like doing that is because we have come so far in terms of the ability to count votes, to count them accurately and, like without problems and stuff like that. It is ridiculous how far we have come since 1776.
Yeah.
Or no, after that, it was like, because that was.
We all can go on Google right now and check.
Yeah.
Right now, just for all the people in the future, the 2020 election is undecided as we speak right now. I mean, if anyone, by the way, if anyone finds out something happened, please put it in the comments because we're all very curious. But so the Electoral College is, at hand, and we're all talking about it right now as a topical matter in that sense. Jared, continue. I'm sorry.
No, okay. So now the question is, let's say you find yourself in the position that you have to debate it. Right.
Yes.
Right. And so it's
a common. I've seen that topic. I've had that topic. Tim, you've had that topic. I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, it's been the last.
Let's think about the multiple ways that the topic could be worded, though. Right. It's like one way could be where you just absolutely say you have to do popular vote instead of Electoral College. But the other way is simply abolish the Electoral College. I guess I haven't thought about alternatives to the Electoral College that are not the popular vote. Have you ever thought about that? Like, is there?
Yeah. Like, you can amend the Electoral College, right? So, if nothing else, I would just run it as a counterplan to, like, if the AF were saying we're going to abolish it, I would say like, nah, we're just going to amend it, because there are some ideas used within current measures that were way later edits to it, but I think are actually maybe solutions, right? Like, I think I understand why it was there before, but you have places like Nebraska and places like Maine that'll actually split up their electoral vote.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of common criticism around the winner-take-all, circumstance. I think the fact that the Electoral College is winner-take-all creates so much.
Really quick. I mean, and just to explain this, I mean, what you're talking about is the states can kind of create their own rules as far as what their votes do. Okay.
A little bit, yeah.
And so for those of you who maybe don't understand what we're talking about, most, I believe, states have a rule where if the popular vote in that state goes to one candidate, the majority winner of the popular vote for one candidate gets all the electoral votes of that state. And how many electoral votes do you have? Do you guys know the answer to that? You know the answer to that.
So that we have? What do you mean?
Like
Every state,
like my state,
Congress people.
Oh.
There's two houses. There's two rooms of Congress. One is the
Chambers,
Senate. Every
yeah.
state gets two. Okay?
Yeah.
Every state. It doesn't matter if you have 200,000 people or 40 million people, you get two senators.
Mm-hmm.
Every state also has representatives in the House. And that is purely based on population. And
right. The minimum that any state can have is 3, right? Because you have 2.
Okay, hold on, Jared. The minimum electoral votes any state can have is 3. But the minimum House of Representative members could be 1.
Okay.
And this is where the Electoral College comes into play. So now, Tim, you brought to focus some states will split their electoral votes. But most states right now, whatever the majority vote is in that state, whoever presidential candidate is the majority vote in that state gets all the electoral votes.
So let's start with the affirmative. Let's say that you're given the topic that...
Jared, hold on. I don't mean to cut you. Remember this point and go back to it. My final point to bring it back to what I said in the beginning is a small state like Wyoming has 3 electoral votes. There are 7 states that have only 1 member in the House based on their population. And that's kind of crazy, right? Because when you look at California has 53 House of Representative members of the House, 53. And they have 2 senators. So their electoral votes is not affected that greatly by the electoral system because their population is so high that they only gain 2 votes out of 53. That's a negligible 5% or something like that or less. Whereas in Wyoming, they have 1 House and 2 Senate seats. And their vote now is substantially increased based on this system. So that is the underarching on the merits reason why it's good. It gives smaller states more of a say. So moving on from there, Jared, please.
Yeah,
Sorry. Thank you.
Let's assume that like we're on the affirmative. Let's just start there, right? And so we are putting together a case on why we should abolish the Electoral College. You got to think about what alternative you're putting in. I don't know about you, but I think the popular vote is just by and far the most popular alternative to the Electoral College. You just straight up.
The popular vote meaning all of us voting.
Yeah, I can't even think of really a second alternative to that, but it seems to be those are the main 2 options, right? So why? Some of that background that you're pointing out could be a reason why, and then and so your overarching argument is like fairness.
Yeah,
right? Where like individuals should have a relatively equal voice. Some other but I always advocate thinking outside the box, right? Thinking about other advantages.
That's why I like you, Jared.
Yeah, and so think about this. Not only can you not only can you have a sense of fairness, but think about the recount advantage. That one of the things that so the closure idea that we started with, we might actually have better closure with a popular vote than with the Electoral College. Because think about the situation we're in right now, right? We have Joe Biden with nearly 2 million more votes than Donald Trump, but Donald Trump is still suing very select portions of the country. If there were no Electoral College, would there be any lawsuits? Right? I'm thinking there might not be. Like you wouldn't think about how you would call for a recount. You would call for a recount like district by district, perhaps. Yeah. But even then, man, if there's 2 million votes difference, the chances that you're going to have all these lawsuits goes down, in my opinion.
What do you think, Tim?
I think it maybe limits the potential for oversight. But then again, for now, we're just saying on the affirmative. So what else is the benefit, right? I think the story that's commonly told is the overrepresentation of small Midwestern states, right? There is not news coming out of Ohio generally, or news coming out of Iowa or Nebraska generally.
We love Ohio!
For election periods. And so there's an argument that some states get way more value, right? Like the value of a ballot in Florida is way greater than the value of a ballot in California. Like, which way. So
are you talking because of its swing value or due to its population?
1%. What's that?
Are you asking because of its swing value or because of its population value?
Because of its swing value. So, I mean, I'll give it a smaller example. The value right at this moment of a ballot cast in the state of Nevada is dramatically higher than the value of a vote from New York. So voter turnout in those places, in states that are very hard and fast one line, right? So your Utah, Massachusetts, New York, Arkansas, California, like states that are one, way and very likely will always be the way. The ones that they call when only 1% of votes have been recorded, voters are super disenfranchised to vote in presidential elections in those states because they know that their vote, no matter which way they cast it, doesn't actually matter. It feels like it doesn't matter. So that's one of the bigger harms that you saw.
And really quick, Tim, don't forget what you're saying. But you're saying like in a state that it's time and time again voting the same way, generally as a population of a state, your vote doesn't matter. Meaning whatever I do, the population's going to go this way. So that's why it matters. Just so you know, like the popular vote is going in that way.
Correct. In the state of California, I can vote Republican until I'm blue in the face, but California as a whole is not going to go Republican. If I'm in Utah, I can vote blue. It's just not going to happen. It's a red state. So when those things happen, that disenfranchises the voters in that state. Now, meanwhile, it brings out like tremendous, support and voter turnout, or at least like some kind of interest in hell. I feel bad for the people of Michigan. Like I can only imagine, or Pennsylvania, like the number of political ads that they're experiencing versus the population of Massachusetts that is like, forever blue. That would be really an issue. So the manner of some votes counting more than others, I typically hear as the most common harm story around the Electoral College.
Yeah. And so when I'm on the affirmative, one of the things I really like doing is thinking about what are the most popular negative arguments and preempting them, right?
Affirmative to what resolution, Jared?
For like abolishing the Electoral College. And so let's think about what the negative might say, and then we'll kind of come back and do a little rejoinder after that, all right? So on the negative, I developed one argument, and I'm not, absolutely 100% on board, but here it goes, that you start off with the uniqueness that I think that strategically you should grant that the Electoral College gives rural Midwestern towns a little bit of an edge, okay? Because I think the math just
a critical voice that would encourage candidates and other people to go there, despite their population.
In general, and then what I did, I started with that, and I kind of go, okay, what issues apply to these states that are valuable to everybody? And I narrowed in on agriculture. Yeah, I think that agriculture, like in those areas, are really, really important, and things like farm bills.
I think you're right.
Like relief packages and things like that, and so saying that we should kind of protect our agriculture industry becomes like the thesis of it, and so and therefore like that's why we have to maintain it. And so I might pair that up with a counter plan with like the district-based counter plan, the Maine and Nebraska. Just say, listen, that's fine, but we should still give a slight edge to agricultural dependent states. They feed us, you know what I mean? It's important. It's rough being a farmer, stuff like that. And so that's the direction I go on the negative. What do you think about that?
That's 100% where I would go, because I think the argument, like the main disadvantage, is the tyranny of the urban voter, right? So
yes,
that's part of why, like Matt's been bringing up from the beginning, like that was why all the way from like the Great Compromise until today, if we had just a straight popular vote, candidates would go to LA, Chicago, New York, Seattle, and and what's the point of them going to some of the counties that we see right now, right? Like that are becoming extremely popular and super important. The idea behind some of these battleground states is that they're microcosms. microcosms, meaning that they are representative of the whole of the United States. They have dense urban areas. That's why Ohio comes up. It has dense urban areas, it has a lot of suburban territory, it has a lot of rural farmland. Like, it theoretically is representative of the larger section of the country. I don't buy that. So, like, on the rejoinder point, we'll maybe get to that for a second. Like, I think that there's a lot of good responses to that argument, but theoretically, that's why battleground states are supposed to be.
I want to chime in real quick. I mean, I want to say, like, we have, in a world, let's go into fiat. Okay, I want to take your minds away from the realities of
look at fiat, everybody. Go ahead.
Here comes some fiat, right? In a world where we don't live in such in a world, this is hard to believe. I'm going to say this out loud on the internet, broadcasting to all of you. In a world where we're not so ideologically, at least it would appear that we are just ideologically opposed to one another, where you can just say one word and you don't respect someone. In a world that doesn't exist, I think the Electoral College is good in the fact that, again, as it was originally, I thought, as innocent as you can make it, as it was intended to give states with very few people in it say beyond the people themselves, because they are a state and they need to be heard and accepted by the president or whoever may be in executive power, because otherwise, as Tim just said, there's 7 or 8 cities that you need to go to, or call it 20 cities in the United States you need to go to win an election by popular vote. So there's an interesting. This is all in fiat land, where we all are all still not ideologically just opposed to one another, and we respect one another, and we just have different opinions on certain things. But I like the idea at the core that, like, the states matter, and we need to give a voice to those states that may not have as many people as the state of California, for instance, that has 40 million plus people.
Okay, I think that.
And I have no basis for that other than I just feel that way. It's an opinion.
Kind of give in to this, like, tyranny of the urban voter thing, and strategically, I'm thinking. I
agree with you too, Jared. So I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth.
Does that work the other way? Do we have a tyranny of the rural voter?
No, you're about to give it to me. I think it sounds. Let's hear it. I mean, that's the truth. What happens to the people?
So if we were going to measure how well the Electoral College worked, if I was on the affirmative, I would be thinking, let's take a look at every time the popular vote didn't match the Electoral College and assess whether or not the policies that came out of that winner were good.
Let me ask you this: you're forgetting Tim's alternative. Tim, what was your counter plan? You had a counter plan that wasn't abolish.
Well, I think that we're weighing down whether or not, like, on the abolish versus don't abolish point.
Yeah.
On the counter plan, the idea is that you separate it into districts. So Maine, for example, gives one electoral vote for the popular vote. So whoever has the most votes, like the way that every other state distributes it, whoever gets the most total votes gets one electoral vote. Then they split up their districts otherwise. So if there's
two senators.
Who do the senators go to?
Hold on real quick. But the popular vote gets 2 because there's 2 senators per state and then per district.
That would make sense. But in the circumstance, at least as I was reading today, totally possible that I'm wrong, because Maine only has 3. They
have 2 senators and 1 House member. That's what the only population based one is the House.
Pretty sure.
Correct. They have 2. They have. I've got to double check my math. In any case, you can split it out to where the popular vote gets some percentage, we'll call it 2, and then the districts each get 1. So that's the idea behind it, how you can split it out. So theoretically, you could still be coming down to very similar numbers, right? So like you look at Florida, it's patchwork, where there's lots of areas that went really blue and others went really red, but it could still come out very, very close in the way that the popular vote also came out. So the two could represent each other, and that's maybe the argument that you can make, that a district-based, non-winner-take-all strategy would more closely mirror the popular vote while still giving voice to the rural areas. I think that's the narrative you run with. I think if the affirmative side has done a lot more math or done a lot more modeling, they'd be able to tear that up, though, because that so far is like one of the more creative counterplans that I've heard, besides like, burn it down, anarchy, or like whatever.
I really do appreciate creative counterplans, though. I do, and that's a good one. It has literature on it. There's examples. You know what I mean? It's like that one. Like it fits a lot of things. But like what we were talking about before is, why don't you just push back on, dude? The urban vote is not tyranny. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I everything we say on this is just in fiat land and our not necessarily our personal views. I want you to all know that, but I also want you to know that I agree, Jared. Like, it's what's a fallacy? A fallacy is a overgeneralization. Like you can't. It's very easy to say tyranny of the urbanites. Like that's just a tagline world type thing.
Well, that's where I'm going with this, is because I want to talk about how when people like get to the impacts on their disadvantage and they say, all right, and the impact of this is tyranny. And I remember doing that.
What is tyranny?
Yeah, I remember doing that myself. And now I look back on myself and I cringe because that's not an explanation. I'm sorry.
No.
That's, you know what I mean? That is not. I'm sorry. You're not doing the work to explain.
You're gonna need to connect
how
the
important
dots.
it is. Yeah, you know what I mean. It's like you have to explain that honestly. Yeah. Like what's the tyranny that you're talking about? Because so let's think about like the first time in a long time when the popular vote didn't match the Electoral College. Al Gore, right? What would have been the massive repercussion to that? Like climate change legislation. Is that the tyranny that you're talking about? Like
I won the popular vote.
Yeah, but like no matter what you feel about climate change legislation, whether or not it would have worked or not, or even if you believe in it, that's not tyranny. That's not, like, I mean, let's start.
I agree. Like
this.
What you're saying, Jared, is like the term tyranny, when you say that's your impact, is vague.
Yeah,
tyranny, you're going to need to explain your definition of tyranny. And
not only I'm explaining the response to that is that you respond to the vagueness of tyranny with the specificity of what the real world would have been.
And play out the worst case scenario and even ask if that is tyranny. Yeah. I mean, come on. It's so I feel that way in our world today now. We all need to really take a step back and realize that we are all like we got it pretty good. We're all complaining about our Wi-Fi. You know what I mean? Like that's and there are people suffering right now, but as far as our country as a whole, it's not a horrible country to be in, and I still believe that, and I continue to believe that. I literally think that these discussions is what drove me to debate. It's what drove me to force myself to constantly be critical of every side and kind of never take anyone too seriously and do the research yourself. You know what I mean? And it's funny how, these moments where we have these big moments, like this is a historical moment. If someone won by now, I'm gonna be upset that none of our viewers, which are definitely watching, told us yet. So but it's important. It's important we can talk about these things, and debate is the best place to talk about these things.
Okay, so the last thing about the Electoral College is, I think I hold a soft spot in my heart for federalism arguments, and there's a
federalism quickly defined is what, Jared?
The federalism argument comes into play where you point out that the 10th Amendment about anything not specified
states' rights
is states' rights.
States have rights, the federal government has rights.
Yeah, states' rights. So instead of just enforcing popular vote, make the argument that the states are already moving towards a popular vote. There are some states that are already talking about just withholding their electoral votes until they get a conclusive popular vote, and their electoral college votes go that direction. And then you could have an argument about closure, about why having 270 votes or 540 votes is a better way to have closure than to 360 million votes. You know what I mean? And now you can still have that conversation. I've always thought that was a really clever counterplan. Tim, have you heard of that sort of all the electoral college votes go to the popular vote winner?
No, honestly, that almost sounds like it's just for the sake of having an electoral college. I don't see the actual unique purpose of an electoral college.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe it's an irony argument, but I don't see why it even still matters at that point.
No, I don't, like, okay, maybe you could even make an argument just about, sort of history and preservation and stuff like that. If we could effectively have the popular vote, but with the Electoral College as a way of remembering our roots.
Tim's counterplan. Tim's counterplan is effectively that, right? I mean, Tim said you split your electoral votes based on districts.
No, it's different. It's different because, like, California would devote all 55 Electoral College votes to whoever the winner is, right? And so
that's what happened.
So if all 50 states agreed to that, that would mean that all of the Electoral College, it would be unanimous that the president is. If
you are defining a 10th Amendment argument. Yes.
You extrapolate, right, is if every single state agreed to give all of the Electoral College votes to the popular vote winner, that would mean there would be a unanimous vote in the end.
Which I think keeping something for the sake of keeping something is a horrid justification with every historical example of it. But even when you get down to why it's important, right, to still have congressional districts, like even say the counter plan, where it is we're going to break it down district by district, I think then you run into the major argument of gerrymandering, of like the current congressional district lines are drawn terribly and for all kinds of corrupt reasons. And without a whole lot of justification besides socioeconomic lines and all like historical redlining. And like there's so many issues I think that come up with congressional districts in the ways that those are drawn that maybe my counterplan would be torn to shreds even more than the popular vote. Because
at this point, I'm like, oh my God, I want to like find absurdism evidence now about like why just going through the motions of life for the absurdity of it is good, is valuable, it gives us meaning. Like I think that's a fascinating debate for the Electoral College, just for a different direction. Absurdism. Oh,
you guys, I want you guys to all take away a few things from this discussion today. We talked a little bit of the background and history of the Electoral College. We gave you a couple counter plans and responses, one namely being the one Tim discussed all night tonight. We are also promoting the idea of discussing irony and bringing absurdism into your debates. These are all things that judges want to hear.
Electoral College, specifically.
Your coaches want to teach. And, I had fun. So thank you, Tim.
All right, everybody. Hey, listen, that's our show today. We will be back next week. Who knows what we're talking about, okay? We got Tim Phoebe from Visolutions. We got Matt Shapiro, Esquire. I am your debate coach, Jared Kubika Miller. We will see you next week, everybody.
Love each other, everybody.